My name is Samantha. I was 20 years old at the time, working at a Walmart located near a small town called Jackson in Alabama. Since I was not enrolled in school full-time, my manager often scheduled me for overnight shifts back when the store still stayed open 24 hours a day. Because it was a supercenter, there were always a handful of employees on the clock overnight. Still, my shift that night ran from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., and I was one of only a few workers assigned to stocking duties. There were maybe 1 or 2 employees running the registers at the front of the store. Since the Walmart sat out in the rural countryside of Alabama, we rarely saw many customers at such late hours. Overnight shifts were mainly used for restocking shelves. I did not personally know the other workers on duty, but the store was so massive that we hardly ever crossed paths anyway. I started the night folding jeans in the men's department and straightening up the area. I usually kept my headphones in during overnight shifts because there was rarely a supervisor around to tell me otherwise. Around 11:30 p.m., a customer walked into the jeans section, which was not all that unusual. People would still wander in until about midnight. The man approached me and asked if we had the same pair of pants in a different waist size. I apologized and explained that everything we had was already out on the rack. He thanked me and stepped away. As he stood there putting the jeans back, we accidentally made eye contact, which felt uncomfortable and awkward. He walked off, and I went back to my work. As more time passed, the store slowly emptied out until it felt completely abandoned. There was no one in sight anywhere around me. It had to be around 1 a.m. when I moved over to the appliances section. I was making several trips back and forth with boxes from the stockroom where unopened items were stored. I wheeled a cart full of boxes down one of the aisles and began filling the shelves. Since many of the shelves were empty, I could clearly see into the aisle next to me. That was when I noticed someone standing there watching me. As soon as he realized I saw him, he quickly looked away, but his face seemed strangely familiar. I stepped closer to get a better look and realized it was the same customer from earlier that night. How could he still be in the store after all that time? Trying not to draw attention, I pushed my cart into the next aisle to see if he had anything in his hands. He was holding absolutely nothing. There was no way someone could shop for 2 hours and not pick up a single item. Something felt very wrong. I hurried to finish stocking the coffee makers and appliances, then pushed the empty cart back to the stockroom. I stayed in the back for a while because I honestly felt like that man had been watching me longer than I first thought. I sat in the employee break room and played on my phone for a bit. When I finally decided to return to work, I chose to switch tasks and head to the grocery side of the store so I would be farther away. I went into the dairy cooler and loaded several crates with milk, yogurt, and other dairy products. The process took a long time since I had to carefully check expiration dates on everything. Over the constant roar of the massive refrigerators keeping the cooler cold, I suddenly heard the dairy cooler door slam open. There was a small opening between boxes stacked on a pallet that gave me a clear line of sight to the door, and I swear it was the exact same customer from earlier. I immediately dropped down and hid beneath one of the shelves, dragging a large box filled with eggs in front of me as cover. I did not worry about making any noise because the refrigerators were incredibly loud. If anyone wonders why I chose to hide, it was because I already believed this man had been lingering in the store and watching me. Seeing him in an employees-only area and then walking straight into the dairy cooler made it clear something bad was about to happen. I stayed crouched behind the box with my head tucked down for what felt like forever, waiting to hear the cooler doors open and close again. After a long stretch of silence, I assumed he must have left after failing to find me. I finally lifted my head from my arms and looked up over the box, and I screamed. He was standing right there, smiling down at me. The moment I screamed, his smile disappeared. He reached out and tried to put his hand over my mouth to stop the noise, but I refused to let that happen. I shoved the box of eggs straight into him and as they crashed to the floor, he stumbled back while staring down at the mess near his shoes. I bolted past him, and when he did not grab me, I kept running until I found another stock employee and begged him to help me. His name was Bob, which I remembered from his name tag. Moments later, a man from the dairy cooler walked up to both of us and calmly apologized. He claimed he was from corporate and said he was there to make sure the store was operating properly. He insisted he never meant to frighten me and said he was only checking on me in the dairy cooler to ensure I was working. Bob seemed to accept his explanation without question, though he did not strike me as very bright. I asked the man why he had tried to cover my mouth, and he replied that he was only trying to prevent a scene. Then, unbelievably, he told me to go finish working in the appliances section before turning around and leaving. As he hurried down the aisle, I called out asking his name. Without stopping, he answered Tom, and then he was gone. The next day, I called one of the managers and asked if there had been a corporate visit the previous night, or if anyone named Tom was familiar. My manager, Margaret, told me it sounded like complete nonsense. There was no record of a corporate employee named Tom, and no one from corporate would ever visit the store at 2 a.m. They reviewed the security footage and filed a police report once they realized the man was a stranger. The cameras showed he had been following me through the aisles for several hours in my shift. I told Margaret the first could no longer work overnight shifts, and she understood. I still work there, but now I stick to daytime stocking or cashier duties. What is one place you can visit and almost guarantee you will run into the strangest, most unsettling people in our society? I honestly cannot remember a single Walmart trip where I did not see at least one person who completely caught my attention in a bad way. And strange is not even the right word for what I am about to describe. This happened on the Thursday, right before Black Friday. My local Walmart was open later than usual that night. I was there around 11 o'clock, hoping to buy a new laptop. By pure luck, I grabbed the very last laptop that was being advertised for an incredible Black Friday deal. As soon as I picked it up, a large, filthy-looking man walked up to me and claimed that he desperately needed a laptop. I awkwardly told him I was sorry and that it was the last one. That was when he became aggressive and started causing a scene. Something was clearly off about him, and my heart started pounding because I am not someone who deals well with confrontations like that. As people nearby began staring, I clutched the laptop box and hurried away toward the checkout line. He continued shouting at me as I walked off, which felt unreal. A few other customers in line tried to calm me down, joking about how the guy was clearly crazy and telling me not to worry about it. Eventually, I made it home, and everyone in my house was already asleep. I decided to sit outside near the pool and start setting up my new laptop. A moment later, the motion sensor light on the side of the house suddenly switched on, the one that activates whenever it detects movement. I went over to check and make sure no one was actually there. That light did go off occasionally, especially since there was a small wooded area next to the house where animals often pass through. Still, I am pretty jumpy, so I went back inside, locked the door, and continued setting up my laptop in the living room. Not long after, a car alarm started blaring outside. I immediately recognized the sound as my Cadillac. I looked out the window to confirm it was coming from my car. I rushed upstairs to grab my keys and pressed the panic button, trying to shut the alarm off. The remote did not work from inside the house, so I stepped out onto the porch and clicked it again until the alarm stopped. That was when I noticed a car parked in front of our house that definitely had not been there when I arrived home. Any car sitting on our street was suspicious by default. We live in a gated neighborhood, and everyone has large driveways, so there is rarely any street parking. I stepped off the porch and realized there was someone sitting inside that car. I immediately went back inside and locked the door. I rushed to my mom's room and told her I believed someone outside was a threat to us. My parents have a complicated situation, and my dad does not always stay with us. If he had been there that night, things would have felt very different. My mom followed me downstairs, clearly shaken by what I had told her. She looked through the peephole in the front door and suddenly gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. I looked through it next and felt sick to my stomach. Standing on our front stoop was a massive man. I whispered to my mom that I was almost certain he had followed me home from Walmart. Almost immediately, the doorknob began turning as the man tried to get inside. When it did not open, he started slamming his fists against the door. My mom cried out in fear, and my younger sister ran out of her room, panicking once she realized what was happening. The banging stopped, and the house fell silent except for my mom speaking urgently on the phone with the police. A few minutes passed while she stayed on the line with 911, waiting for officers to arrive. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from the den downstairs. A window had been smashed. My mom and sister screamed and started crying. I told them to run upstairs while I rushed to lock the den door. I stayed there, bracing myself for another impact or an attempt to break through. Nothing happened. Instead, I heard a police siren briefly sound outside the house. It was the fastest police response I had ever experienced. I ran outside to guide them to the den where the shattered glass was. Inside, the officers found the large, filthy-looking man crouched behind one of our couches. He was arrested immediately, and we chose to press charges. The entire time, he screamed threats and curses at me, only making things worse for himself. Both officers told us he appeared unstable and likely under the influence of drugs. They reassured us that he would not be coming back and suggested we try to get some rest. So while it might seem entertaining to people watch at Walmart and laugh at the strange behavior you see, remember that you can also encounter some of the most dangerous individuals in society at your local Walmart. Working weekends at Walmart as an overnight stock worker was my second job while I was wrapping up college. I needed extra money to start paying off my student loans, so I took whatever work I could find. I did not interact with customers at all. My responsibilities were signing for late-night deliveries, handling warehouse tasks, and stocking shelves while the store was closed. Most shifts ran from either 11 to 7 or 12 to 7. One night in particular, Thursday, July 9th, 2015, is burned permanently into my memory. I was halfway through my shift, working in the electronics department. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone walk past the aisle I was in. Normally, that would not have stood out, except there were only two other employees in the building with me that night, Alvin and Baco. Both of them were wearing the same Walmart shirts I had on. I knew this because all three of us clocked in together. The person I saw was dressed completely in black, which immediately made me uneasy. I walked to the edge of the aisle and peeked around the shelf, but no one was there. I called out both Alvin and Baco by name. When neither of them answered, the situation felt even stranger. Still, I brushed it off and went back to work. I had been needing to use the bathroom for a while, and planned to go once I finished that aisle. Just moments later, there was a loud crash several aisles away that made me jump. I ran over to check it out and saw that a bicycle had somehow been knocked off its hook. The hook itself was still firmly in place, which meant someone would have had to intentionally knock the bike down. I hung it back up and began walking through the aisles, feeling extremely uneasy. I reached the final aisle near the back of the store, where the paper goods and cleaning supplies were kept. That was when I heard a disturbing sound that I can only describe as a laugh. It sounded like it came from the aisle right next to me. Once again, I hurried back to investigate. My heart sank when I saw a man dressed entirely in black standing at the end of the aisle. His back was facing me, but his head was turned just enough that I could see half of his face. Then, without warning, he took off running. He did not run toward me, but instead disappeared down another aisle. I could hear his footsteps echoing through the store. I had a split second to decide whether to chase him or find my coworkers, and I chose to go find them. The whole time, I could hear those disturbing laughing noises, along with footsteps, and honestly felt like they were moving around me in circles. I eventually found Alvin in the women's clothing section, and warned him to keep an eye out for someone who was not supposed to be in the store and was dressed completely in black. We did not have walkie-talkies, so I asked him to let Baco know as well, if he happened to see him. I then excused myself because I truly could not hold it any longer and needed to use the bathroom. I hurried to the employees' only restroom located back in the warehouse area. I layered a thick nest of toilet paper on the seat inside one of the stalls and sat down. And yes, I am absolutely the type of person who sits down to pee. A moment later, the bathroom door opened and then shut. With only 3 or 4 people working that night, I called out, asking who was there. When no one answered, my stomach dropped. I heard that awful laughing sound again, and someone slowly appeared in the crack of the stall door. They stepped closer until the gap was completely blocked, and all I could see was a single eye staring at me. Then the whispering started. I could not make out any actual words, but the echo in the bathroom made it far more unsettling. I suddenly remembered that I had Alvin's phone number saved, so I grabbed my phone and called him immediately. I spoke loudly on purpose, telling Alvin to get to the bathroom right away and help me. I stayed on the line with him as I watched the man outside the stall laugh one last time before running out of the bathroom. I urged Alvin to hurry, and about 20 or 30 seconds later, he rushed inside. He told me he did not see anyone on his way there. Since we did not have any security staff working while the store was closed, we could not even check the cameras ourselves. I stayed with Alvin for the rest of the shift, helping him wherever he was working, because there is safety in numbers. I texted my boss that night, and when I woke up around 3 in the afternoon the next day, I read his reply. He said that all the security camera screens had shown nothing but static from the night before. As far as he knew, no one had shut them off. Reading that message gave me chills. He believed what I told him and assumed it was connected to the camera failure. But without video proof of trespassing or a break-in, there was nothing he could really do. It was all well beyond my pay grade anyway. That remains the only overnight shift I have ever worked where something truly unexplainable took place.